I'm Carl Euland Helverson, and you are watching Living Green on a Blue Planet. On April 22nd, 2024, the Pilgrim Baptist Church, or more specifically the PBC Green Team, coordinated and hosted a public forum at the main library of the Allen County Public Library. The topic was Planet versus Plastics, Reduce, Replace, Renewable Energies. It brought together a number of vendor booths to offer information and programs to attendees. It had a number of keynote speakers, but also we had a special greeting, a brief greeting from Sharon Tucker, the Mayor-elect, who would only be the Mayor-elect for 24 hours. The next day she became our mayor. So that was quite an honor. The program was coordinated by Sheila Curry Campbell, who did an awesome job of bringing these different entities together. So I hope you enjoy it. What you're going to see is simply a small sampling of the speakers. And if you're interested, then mark your calendar. So if they do it again next year, you make sure that you attend. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to speak to you all today. I really appreciate it. As I said earlier, my name is Carrie Corpola. I work for the City Sustainability Office. We technically work out of City Utilities as of right now. I'm here today to give an update about the Climate Action Adaptation Plan. So I will start with a little bit of the past first, and then move right on through to the present and what's in store for the future. So you can't see it, but we have our timeline. So this process started back in 2019, and it started with our greenhouse gas inventory. So our Climate Action Adaptation Plan, which was published under Sustaining Fort Wayne as our initiative, is composed of two sections. We have our greenhouse gas emissions reduction, and then we have our Hoosier Readiness Index Resilience Assessment, which is a mouthful, but we usually call it the RA. So it's composed of these two parts. We're concerned with lowering our impact on climate change, but also preparing for and increasing the resiliency of the city of Fort Wayne. So we started with our greenhouse gas inventory, which we completed in 2019. I'll just read for you guys. Our highest emitter was our water and wastewater treatment and delivery, followed by our buildings and facilities, and then our streetlights and traffic signals, our vehicle fleet, and then our transit fleet. So as Ms. Sheila mentioned, Dr. Pressey mentioned, our first phase was to tackle the civil city side of things, to understand what our impact was before we could start working with the community to address that impact. So as I said, we completed the inventory in 2019, which we then moved on to our Hoosier Resilience Index Readiness Assessment. So this is a tool that was built by the Environmental Resiliency Institute, which is a nonprofit that operates out of Indiana University, Bloomington. They provide resources and support for cities all across Indiana, not just cities, but organizations, to combat climate change, to provide funding resources and technical know-how. So the readiness assessment is a tool for municipalities to understand where their weakness and strengths are when it comes to preparing for climate change and how they can take the next steps needed to increase the resilience and preparedness. So it's divided into 8 sections. It addresses things like public health and wellness, our built environment, our natural world, and it also is tailored to our region. So the Fort Wayne area is most at risk for extreme heat, extreme precipitation, and flooding. So we made sure to look through those lenses as we completed our readiness assessment. When I say completed, we spoke to subject matter experts within the city to understand where the city is at right now in terms of preparedness and where we need to go. So that was completed in 2020. Once both of those sections were completed, we then published the Climate Action Adaptation Plan under Sustaining Fort Wayne back in April of last year. So once we published the Climate Action Adaptation Plan, we had a lot of different directions to go. So the readiness assessment has 76 action items, which is a lot. And when I say action items, each one of those action items is an avenue for us to improve our resiliency. Again, whether it's making sure people have somewhere to go if there's an emergency, making sure we manage our flooding, things like that. So 76 is a lot, so we knew we needed to get organized and understand how the city was going to address its impact on climate change. So to do that, we brought in some outside help. Since October of last year, we have been working with Caramita. They are an environmental consulting firm out of Indianapolis. And if you could see it, I would tell you that there is a pretty general outline that we go through. So first we do a literature review, which just means we look at all of the documents and plans and ordinances that the city has to understand the progress we've made so far and perhaps places where there's not as much work being done. So we look through all those documents and we compare it to our readiness assessment to see where there's overlap. And once we do that, we prioritize a limited number of actions, small bites to eat the whole elephant. And we prioritize based on, generally for us, we wanted to see, again, what is our low-hanging fruit and where are areas that we definitely need to work on and improve with. So our current step in this plan is our roadmap development. So roadmap in this context means how do we gather together the people within the city and decide the course of action to advance our resiliency, advance our communication, and advance our collaboration. So the topics that were prioritized for this round, we have our vegetation and critical habitat, we have emergency planning and heat management, we have buildings, facilities, and energy, we have transportation, infrastructure, and development, waste management, and fleet conversion. And I'll just call out a couple of those because I know I'm running a little behind. So in terms of waste, we've been talking about plastic today. We know that there's a need to tackle the waste issues within Fort Wayne and the greater area, including as we start to decarbonize and include solar and EVs and batteries like that, we need to be prepared for that influx of waste. So how do we deal with the best way to recycle batteries or the best way to recycle solar panels or even reuse them? I wanted to give a special shout out to our heat management place. Community Development was recently selected to participate in a heat mapping grant award. So they are going to be doing that this summer. If you want to find me later, there is on Engage Fort Wayne, they have a sign up opportunity for people who want to participate and help with that. And also in terms of decarbonization, for fleet conversion and buildings and facilities, we want to move away from our traditional fossil fuel sources of power. And in terms of next steps, for the rest of 2024, we will be working on these roadmaps and we will be putting ourselves out into the community more. We want to let people know that we have a climate action plan and what it means and why we're doing the work that we're doing. And we want to hear from the community on how we can refine the internal city process to address their concerns. And also we want to know how the city can support the community in their efforts to decarbonize and to protect the environment. So that is the rest of 2024. We'll also be working on a survey and plans for community listening sessions, interacting with community organizations, and planning for 2025, which is when we hope to launch that part of the plan. Okay, that is all I have.
Well, good. Let me see. It's still morning. It's still technically morning. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone for being here. I have to tell you that I'm excited about the opportunity that lies ahead of us in order to be able to both work to save our planet and to prepare ourselves for green energy and all that is involved there. Sheila has been a force to reckon with when it comes to making sure that we take advantage of all the opportunities that are out there for us to be wise stewards of our community and what we leave behind for our kids. So while I am not as in the details as she is, I know that she is going to be a great partner to have on the table or at the table for us, and we'll keep moving that forward. So thank you so much for caring for our community and making sure that we're wise stewards what God has left in our hands. Thank you.
So my name is Brian Fleury. I'm the Northern Indiana organizer with Solar United Neighbors. We are a nonprofit organization that works as consumer advocates to help people overcome the barriers if they want to go solar for their home, their church, their farm, their small business, any number of different possibilities and entities. All right. So what we're going to be talking about today is solar's impact on waste and the planet, the transition to solar, the good, the bad, the ugly, and making equitable solar deployment a reality for Hoosiers. So take a look at this slide here. The largest one, Carrie mentioned that the city of Fort Wayne is really working to address, but by 2050, we're looking at over 70,000 metric tons of municipal waste for the whole country, not just for Fort Wayne, but this is for the whole country. Right up next to that is coal ash. Now we hear a lot of times about coal ash ponds and that type of thing. Plastic waste, which is germane for today's discussion. E-waste, all of us have phones and laptops and that type of thing, and so that's going to be a big thing. And kudos to the Solid Waste District for sponsoring those e-waste recycling days, so that keeps it out of the landfill. Then you have oily sludge, and then the tiny little boxes off on the far right are solar, which will produce by 2050 a very, very small amount in the best and worst case scenario. And I also want to add that the solar industry is constantly improving. As a matter of fact, this company, Q-Cells, is looking at very soon having their solar panels be 100% recyclable, all of the components, which is the direction we want to go. So we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of equitable solar in Indiana. So let's start with the good. We heard some good news today. So my organization, Solar United Neighbors, has had an impact just since 2019 that's pretty significant, and you can read about all of that there. One of our big pillars is that we're also working for equity. We want to partner with organizations like Faith in Place, like Midwest Building, like Dr. Pressy's organization, like the state NAACP, to be able to make sure that our black and brown communities also have access to solar energy if they want to have them on their homes. So what is solar equity? Solar equity is advancing policies that ensure that everyone, particularly those that are most impacted by climate change and marginalized by our history of systemic oppression across society, have the ability to access the benefits of local solar. We heard a little bit about Solar for All. I'm going to mention that a little bit more today, but a lot of the facets of that legislation, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure law from a couple of years ago, focus on tax credits for equitable solar, grant funding, green financing products, technical assistance, and workforce development. All of those are going to be key. And as we also mentioned, the Solar for All announcement includes $156 million for a multi-city program and over $110 million. It's actually $117 for a statewide program. And I confirmed that the statewide program that was selected is the one that the city of Fort Wayne's a part of, that the city of Gary is a part of, that the city of Indianapolis is a part of, that Faith in Place, Solar United Neighbors, and the state chapter of the NAACP are all partners, along with 5 other organizations. And so this is huge. This is huge, friends, that we are going to have $117 million at minimum to be able to put into these equitable solar programs for our low-income community in Gary, Fort Wayne, and Indianapolis. Now for the bad. Average electric rate increases have gone up almost 50% over a little over a decade. me. And this information really struck me. So the national average energy burden, so that national average is what the average for the whole United States, what each household pays out of the proportion of their household income towards their electric bill. 3%. Indiana, 6%. And with all due respect to our good friends at Indiana Michigan Power, in 2023 alone, there were over 165,000 disconnects. 1/3 of those came through the Indiana Michigan Power coverage territory. And that's information from the Energy Justice Lab. And now the ugly. Passing fair equitable solar policies is hard. So part of what we want to see, and part of what the policy roadblocks that we're facing is, we want fair compensation for solar owners. We want third-party ownership of solar arrays. And as Dr. Pressey very articulately mentioned earlier, we want to see privately owned, community solar. So how are we making this a reality for all Hoosiers? We invite you to work with your neighbors and local community groups to create a vision for these types of projects. And I do still want to call out and shout out to the city for their efforts on the Solar for All applications and how that will benefit this city. That's going to be huge over the next several years. So working with the city, working with other organizations here locally is going to be important. Joining groups like SUN and all of the other groups here, Dr. Pressey's organization, Faith in Place, and others here in the room to be able to track funding opportunities like the ones we're talking to you about today and support project deployment. And then join with advocates to call for fair and equitable solar policies that benefit everyone, and particularly benefit Hoosiers that are so often left behind in our low and moderate income and disadvantaged communities. And with that, I've concluded. Thank you all for your time.
All right. So we've shared that I'm from Faith in Place, but I do want to share a little bit more about myself. I am a recent graduate of Fisk University out in Nashville, Tennessee. And after, thank you. Yes, ma'am, at HBCU. After my graduation, I really went into focus mode and wanted to do something that connected to my community out in Gary, Indiana, and also Black and brown communities throughout the state. And my deepest passion is caring for BIPOC communities when it comes to air quality and food security. So all of that has an environmental facet to it. No matter where our backgrounds stem from, the environment has a huge impact on our day-to-day lives. And so I got the opportunity to dig a little deeper into my own impact, my own health impacts with environmental justice, and also my communities. And that got me started into environmental justice work. And I began working with Faith in Place in February of 2022. So almost up to my, not February, June of 2022, sorry you all. So we're almost up to year 2 for me. But my start in Faith in Place not only stemmed from my experience in a Black and brown community that has been the front line, that has endured the frontline impacts of environmental injustice, but it also stems from my faith care. And as a Christian, I deeply believe what the scripture says, that the earth is the Lord and all that dwell within it. And so if I do care, and I do believe that, I also have to take good care of that earth for as long as I'm here. And I know a lot of us in this room feel similarly. So Faith in Place, just to give a little introduction, we are that organization that bridges the gap between communities of faith and the environmental movement. It's not often that we see faith discussion in environmental care. So now I want to share a little bit about our vision. So we are here to empower people of diverse faith to move into the environmental movement and also create healthier, more just, and equitable and sustainable communities for all. So we're not just here to say, okay, having long conversations about this work, but we want it to be actionable. Whether that entails some of our faith doctrine when we're having these meetings, or whether it also entails us moving towards energy efficiency. We want to make sure that overlap is done in a way that not only empowers and educates us, but also empowers us to become our own advocates. We live in our own communities. We know what we need. So we also want to make sure that we're taking the mic for ourselves as people of faith, as people in these regions, and speaking up for what environmental justice looks like for us. So we're not only in the state of Indiana, but we are a tri-state organization bridging back to February of 2022. Faith in Place gathered three regions, the three regions, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana. So we are represented in all three of those states. If your house of worship also works within other districts out there as well. So just to share a little bit about what some of our Green Team's missions look like. Some of the houses of worship we work with have started Green Teams and have become more empowered to move into the environmental movement for some practical and also some faith reasons. One practical reason is that a lot of our houses of worship use a lot of electricity, and it's costing us more and more, especially with rate hikes that a lot of us have already talked about. But how do we move to energy efficiency and saving money for our houses of worship? Some Green Teams are doing this work because they want to follow their faith calling, and it is a part of their faith doctrine. Other Green Teams want to feed their community. They want to address food insecurity. And other Green Teams are doing this work and connecting to create more green spaces in their neighborhood, or they want to be able to connect with their neighbors and do that neighbor and earth care in action. And so how are we helping so many houses of worship within these three states? Well, it starts with our Green Teams. Our Green Team model has three facets to it. In order to have a Green Team at your house of worship, we really encourage you to have at least 3 members at your house of worship that are willing to commit the time and the energy towards starting their Green Team. Another facet is that you have an organized structure. So we always say have a chair and a co-chair of that Green Team. That way when someone wants to go on summer vacation, or of course some people get sick, we can continue the momentum that our Green Teams have. And lastly, our Green Teams, they're here to educate, connect, and advocate. So we're not having these meetings with the intention to just do nothing and meet monthly, but we do want to make sure that our meetings are actionable and that there is some next step, and that there is also some resource. So each of these Green Teams have a Green Team coach, myself for the state of Indiana, and you also have the full resources of Faith in Place programs. Now we have about 5 programs within Faith in Place that I want to share about. I won't move into all details for all 5 because I do have limited time, but if you would join me at my table, I'd love to share a little bit more as to how some of our Green Teams engage our 5 program areas. So those 5 deal with energy and climate for houses of worship who want to become a little bit more energy efficient and move towards solar energy. We've talked to so many community partners like Solar United Neighbors and others that we partner with. We don't do this work alone, but we bring in subject matter experts, energy auditors, contractors to walk you along the steps to becoming more energy efficient and hopefully also installing solar. We also have another program, Sustainable Food and Land Use, for houses of worship who want to create green spaces in their community. A lot of us are in communities that have heat islands, that have food insecurity, and a lot of houses of worship are bridging that gap and saying, hey, well, if we need more food in our community, if we only have one grocery store, well, how about we become the new grocery store and grow our own food and produce, or connect to local farmers. So we help do that work as well. And more importantly, advocacy. So advocacy and letting our voices be made known, and a lot of our council meetings, whether it's local, state, or federal meetings, we want to make sure that our faith voices and our environmental advocates are speaking up at these events. So we do notify and also host advocacy workshops for houses of worship that are just starting and that don't know where to start. We also help host the workshops on that. For the sake of time, we're going to move into energy and climate programming. Faith in Place just started a program called Thriving Faith Communities. The program here is focused on helping houses of worship move towards energy efficiency and save money at the same time, and that sounds really nice. So for houses of worship who want to reduce their energy usage, install solar, or just have green energy upgrades, and want to know what incentives are for their local utilities. These meetings are especially instrumental in moving that house of worship along that path. You not only talk to your green team coach, but we also have meetings with subject matter experts. In January, our quarterly meeting there was held with energy auditors. So people within houses of worship that want to figure out where their energy is seeping out of their house of worship, or whether their house of worship is weathered, has weatherization done for it, or if there are different alterations that need to be made for HVAC systems. An energy auditor is the person that will tell you exactly what type of upgrades you need within your house of worship. And for some houses of worship, this is completely free. Another example of advocacy workshop is a legislative update and an advocacy one-on-one. So advocacy one-on-one is starting from scratch in a lot of our houses of worship. We are not familiar with our advocates, with our elected officials, and these types of meetings are tailor-made for our communities that want to get to know those elected officials, want to get to know their roles, and also how they impact our environmental health. And so that's a little bit about our advocacy program. And lastly, there are action alerts. So as we move into voting, action alerts will alert you on locations to vote in, and also dates where you can also vote within your region. They also give you awareness of comment periods for permit renewals. A lot of us live in industry zones, and a lot of those industries have to get permission to emit pollutants into our air and our water. Well, we want to make sure that community members attend these permit renewal hearings and meetings and are able to speak for themselves. And lastly, one other way that houses of worship can work with Faith in Place is an upcoming cohort called the Climate Cohort. Earlier we talked about climate mitigation and climate adaptation plans. Well, within Faith in Place, we want to work with houses of worship to make sure that you are prepared to be the beacon for your community, to be the climate event mitigator. And so we know that within the next coming years, there will be more extreme weather events, whether it is extreme heating or cooling. We want to make sure that houses of worship can stand in the gap and have the resources themselves. So this is a great opportunity for one, to become more aware of climate impacts that are to come. Here are a few ways to stay involved with Faith in Place. We have monthly meetings. Here's my contact info. If any of you all have any information for me, or you want to connect with our policy coordinator, Christina Glazer, please feel free to reach out. I think that is it.
Have been anywhere else, but you chose to be here with us today.